GM, especially with Cadillac, dove head-on into electric vehicles, and so far they've put together a pretty expansive lineup for a wide variety of consumers. But the pairing with Cadillac seemed to go very, very well together. Seems like electric and luxury and premium and sophisticated and really well-styled vehicles, that all just seems to mesh really well. But there was one thing missing, and that was performance, at least until now, because Cadillac is bringing their V division into the EV space, and this is the 2026 Cadillac LYRIQ V. If you drive past a LYRIQ and a LYRIQ V, you may not immediately be able to tell the differences between them, and I think that's what Cadillac is going for. The V branding is about performance, but it's not about being big and boisterous, definitely more gentleman than boy racer, especially since this doesn't have an exhaust note to go along with it. But that means the styling is, by and large, going to be LYRIQ. And I love that fact because the front end design is beautiful and simple, but really leans into the extra lighting. Let's start with this grille here, which is kind of a non-grill grille because it's nice and flat to the touch, but there's a lot of visual texture built into it. And it's also designed to have these lighting elements stand out and create more of that shape without having to build more of it into the actual structure. Plus, we do have the nice bright Cadillac silver logo here, keeping things simple and going along with that lighting. We also have LED daytime running lights and headlights in a bold fashion. These are vertically oriented. You're not gonna miss this out on the road, especially when all those lights turn on. This is already a pretty wide vehicle, and this nose comes down nice and low, but this sort of bookends that entire look. But if you want to know where the V comes in, it happens in that bottom third, and that's where things get more aggressive. This lower fascia is going to be different than you find on the standard model, especially when it comes down to this front splitter, which is carbon fiber, but it's going to be a gloss carbon instead of a naked carbon. And I kind of wish it was naked because that way it would have a different finish to it and would stand out just a little bit more. But this probably lends closer to the rest of the accenting trim pieces here on the vehicle and blends in a little bit better. But let me know if you think that's a spot where Cadillac could do either or maybe does want to stand out a little bit more. I know the Optic V has some naked carbon on it, and that one I definitely appreciate. Cadillac may not like it, but to me this has become the quickest wagon in town because this style, this shape is a little less crossover in that it's very stretched out, but I really do appreciate that. No, it's not as practical as a wagon because we do have a pretty steep drop back here, but I appreciate that it's different because not only do we get a lot of conventional boxy looking SUV crossover looks, we also get a lot of bubbly EVs. And this has done a good job of being neither of those and bringing together a really nice attractive look. But from here, if you're looking for that V design, here's where you'll find it, mostly gonna be in the tires. These are 22-inch wheels with the 275/45 series tire. It is a summer tire as standard. If you want all seasons, you can get them, but you have to check the box, which means you kind of have to check the box for a little bit less performance. You'll also get some more carbon fiber bits, mostly down here on the lower end of the vehicle. It's the same gloss finish as you'll find in the front, and as you'll see shortly, we'll find it here in the back. And then as far as badging goes, it is very limited, but there is a V badge found right here on that rear door. Something that I've always been a little bit particular about, and I appreciate how it's implemented here, is a spoiler, because this does have a roof spoiler, which I think the shape really does need, but we also have a little bit of a deck lid sort of duckbill spoiler here. So a two-tier spoiler, but also very, very low key in how it's implemented. You'll find something like this on the Optic V, but more drastic. And again, in this case, leaning towards simpler instead of more outlandish. Well, I do think a lot of this V design is understated and under the radar. One thing that's going to stand out is going to be the lighting, but that comes from the LYRIQ, not specifically from the V. Because not only do we have big bright lights, we also have some animation to it, as you can see over there on that turn signal. And it's not just here that you get that lighting, it also comes along the side and up the side. So this is a very well lit vehicle, pretty much from whatever angle you're looking at. But besides those spoilers, there isn't a whole lot going on back here. There is no rear wiper, but there probably doesn't need to be based on how steep the rake of the windshield is. As far as badging, this is one of the only other spots you'll find that V badge here on the outside, located right over there. And not only is it the V, but it also has some color in it. You'll notice that the Cadillac badge, just like up front, doesn't have any color. So I like that there's just a little bit added to that badging, which does make it stand out just a little bit more. Obviously, LYRIQ over here, but my favorite thing about the actual badging is that the Cadillac logo is what you go ahead and click to open up the rear hatch. But just like up front, we also get some changes down below, and that's because we have a more aggressive rear splitter. We also have sort of this diffuser-like back end, and there is some carbon fiber on here, but not as obvious. This portion here is going to be gloss black, but everything on top here is going to be that gloss carbon fiber. Obviously no exhaust tips, but what's interesting is so many cars these days seem to be getting rid of exhaust tips, whether they're internal combustion, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or EV altogether. So I think all of this is coming together very nicely, but one of the biggest reasons this LYRIQ V probably is gonna work for you and others is because of its practicality. So let's go ahead and open up that hatch. It might seem a little bit strange, but I actually love the height of the LYRIQ because it's no taller than it needs to be, and it's just tall enough. At 6 feet tall, standing here under the liftgate, I am at no point worried about bumping my head, but the load floor isn't any higher than it has to be, which means it comes in at least a few inches below my waistline, and it's nice and flat. So no recessed storage here. You don't have to lift in and out. Everything in here just slides right out. Now these are the bags I carry onto an airplane. They will both fit in an overhead bin, but if I take those out, you can see just how much space we have here. It's 28 cubic feet, and it is nice and easy to access. Pretty square, not terribly tall, so something to be aware of. But if this isn't enough, if you need closer to say 60 cubic feet, the button release is right over here. Those will drop your second row seats nearly flat. And at that point, there's not a lot of trips to Lowe's or Costco or wherever your favorite big box store is that you won't be able to make on a monthly or occasional basis. If you're trying to sleep in there, it's a little bit uneven, so just something to be aware of. And if you need a little bit more storage that you like to have tucked away, not only do we have a rear cargo cover, but it's going to be found currently under this load floor. I love that we can go ahead and find a place to tuck that, because if you don't need it, then you end up sort of leaving it behind. But in this case, we also have a couple different compartments, and this is deep enough, just for reference, to go ahead and put the included mobile charger. But honestly, if I wanted to, I could probably fit that backpack in this space as well. Needless to say, lots of room, and that is the everyday practicality. V design is great, but does it actually V? Well, it's got 615 horsepower and 650 pound-feet of torque, so I would say yes, but you do actually have to unlock that there within the touchscreen. You can either do it by pressing the button twice for V mode, or you can go ahead and activate it a couple other ways, but either way, that's how you get your maximum power. And with all of that set and in launch control, you should be able to get 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds. At least that's what it's rated for. To me, that is blisteringly quick, but it's also got a top speed of over 130 miles an hour, so it's not like it's just quick and not fast. And it's not just the V logo we find there on the wheels, it's also some V braking power. We have Brembo 6 pistons up front. You can also go ahead and swap out an everyday brake material for something that's going to be a little bit less friendly on your daily drive, but more serious when you're trying to do a lot of heavy stopping. Also, you can go ahead and change the driving characteristics in the software because this does have adaptable dampers. So continuously adaptive dampers means you can make it a little bit softer or a little bit tighter, and that means it's going to do, well, those two things much better than just one trying to lean one way or the other. The other thing is, if you spend a lot of time in the vehicle, you won't have to worry about how far you can go because this is a 103 kilowatt hour battery, and that means it should have a rated range of about 285 miles. Probably not what you're going to find on the highway, but at least 250 at regular cruising speed. Though one downside is going to be the charging. I was looking for a port right about here, but unfortunately we find it on the other side. And also unfortunately, it's not going to be the new NACS connector. This is still using the J1772 paired with that CCS plug for your DC charging. It's not going to be the quickest charging out there. This is still on a 400 volt architecture, not 800, but you should still be able to do your 10 to 80% in a reasonable time. Bathroom break and go ahead and grab a snack. Seating in the front is not wildly dissimilar than what you find in the LYRIQ, but there are going to be a few distinct differences. First of all, if you're looking to make changes to the seat, you're going to find those controls up in the door, not down here on the side, but it does have plenty of adjustment, including your 4-way adjustable lumbar, but it also has a few things you won't find in the LYRIQ, and that's going to be your bolster adjustments. That's going to be both here in the seat back as well as in this cushion, so you should be able to find a pretty tight, grippy driving position for when you want to go ahead and click V mode and turn this thing up to 11, or at least its version of 11. And it's going to be saved on a 2-position memory seating system that will also include the steering wheel because it is a tilt and telescopic automatic adjustment or powered adjustment versus manual. I also have a ton of room up here. In this case, I like to put my seat down and then my legs out, and that works really well for me here. I also have about 3 or 4 inches of headroom, maybe even more considering this glass roof. If you start going off center a little bit, it might get a little bit tight, but let's go ahead and see what it's like in the back seats because this one is a pass with flying colors. When it comes to the back though, space is a little bit tighter than maybe I'd prefer, but I am 6 feet tall and I do actually sit very tall. I run out of headroom faster than most, and if I'm leaning towards the center, I have, as you can probably see, maybe just an inch or 2 of headroom, but if I come back to my seat where it wants me to be, well then unfortunately I am out. And that's gonna be both off to the side and just behind me because the big glass roof cuts off right where I need a little bit more headroom. But again, that's mostly gonna be a me problem or a very tall person problem. You might not experience that. And because these back seats do have a fold down armrest here, what I would do is just lean towards center just a little bit. And beyond that, it's gonna be pretty comfortable because I do have 3-zone climate control. Plus I have the option to go ahead and turn on some climate controlled seating. And the actual room back here with this seat fairly far back, not necessarily all the way, is plentiful. And you can see there is some shape built into this, but because your knees are so high up, basically you're sitting on top of that battery, I won't actually be able to fit my knees under this curve, so the curve actually doesn't quite work for me. But there is additional storage to be found here. There's 2 USB-C ports, a standard outlet, and you're gonna have a little bit of space here in the door, basically cut out for something like a water bottle, not a very large water bottle, but just a standard one you would find at the store. Hopping in the LYRIQ V is gonna be very reminiscent of what you see in the standard LYRIQ, though you might notice there on the steering wheel a slightly different emblem, and that's gonna be our V logo, which is found only a few places here throughout the interior, but you can definitely tell that they're leaning into the black aggressive form of sporty rather than something, I guess, brighter and red, or maybe a little bit more toned down and neutral colors. So black is in. We also do have some accenting stitching and striping. So you see that blue stripe down there in the middle, although the blue striping doesn't carry on through the stitching, and I kind of wish that was the case. Although you can see here in the headrest, this is a 2-way adjustable headrest, but it does have a couple speakers inside. That's because this has the 23 speaker AKG system with Dolby Atmos. And for folks who haven't tried Dolby Atmos, honestly, it might not be for everyone. But what I can tell you is the speakers are good. And if you want that spatial audio, well, this is done very well. You just have to make sure you're using the right format, the right music format to make that happen. But the rest of the interior here is a little bit more minimalist. You have some bright silvers to go ahead and pop and make some accents. We don't have a ton of shaping happening there in the dashboard, just a little bit of an arc there on the very edge, but everything does stay pretty low profile. We do have a glove box, but one thing missing on the outside is going to be a physical control to get there, which means you do have to go into the touchscreen, which at this time is about 2 different clicks. It's not a bad sized glove box, but I wish it was easier to get to. The highlight of this interior has to be the touchscreen though. It goes basically from the inside leg of the passenger to the outside leg of the driver. And not only is it large, but it carries a lot of information on it. So for example, here on the outside where it just seems like it might be a little extra screen, there's actually information here. You can change your different layouts. You can go ahead and adjust things like your lighting. You can also adjust the heads-up display. All of those located right in here. This infotainment screen is certainly large and it has all the features you are likely looking for. But one that most folks might not be aware of is that this is one of the few vehicles you can get that has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay built into the vehicle. Not just the vehicle, but an EV by General Motors. The LYRIQ right now is just about the only one that I can think of. If I've missed one, let me know down in the comments. But if you're not going to use those specific features, we do still have the Google Assistant and Google Play Store because this is running Google Automotive. Everything here is quick and easy to use. You can go ahead and drag and swap your widgets all the way throughout. It's running natively Google Maps. It's also going to use this information to put up on your turn-by-turn direction screen, whether that's going to be Google Maps or through CarPlay or Android Auto, and that heads-up display is augmented reality. That's not really something I can show you at this point, but trust me, it is worth experiencing. But with this touchscreen comes lots of controls, and by lots of controls, I mean a lot of controls. There's a lot that's designed to be done here through this touchscreen that I wish we had a few more buttons for, and I'm one who likes basically as few buttons as we possibly can. But things like that glove box, I just feel like we've gone a little bit too far and it's a little bit too difficult to get to. The LYRIQ here is not the only vehicle guilty of that. There are a few others, and I myself own one. But when it comes to what buttons are available, at least we have controls for the climate. And that's something that people want and use more often than not. I'll admit I set myself to the correct temperature and then I go ahead and click auto and let everything else work itself out. Unless I'm filming, in which case I probably turn down the fan speed. But all the controls you need are going to be found here. And if you need to change the temperature for what's happening in the back seats, that's going to happen from their touchscreen there. Just below here, you'll see another little silver accent. If you click in on that, we have ourselves a tray. And this tray is a little bit deep, but not something that I would put something like a cell phone in, though maybe if you had a smaller phone, it would fit. One thing I would say though, if you put your phone in there and close that, I know I would probably go ahead and forget it's there altogether. Well, you're gonna put most of your items, I suspect it's going to be down here. Let me see if I can make this work, because just under the center armrest, we have a pretty large center storage area. There is at the very front going to be a USB-C port, so that's going to be your most easily accessible charging without moving anything out of the way. And while I like this sort of open deck floor design, it's not going to be overly organized or particularly tall. So if you have a larger item that you want to put here, it could fall left or right. Not that I have anything against this, just something to be aware of. And if you're not using this space the most, then the one you're probably going to use more often than that is going to be your cup holders. Those are nice and easy to get to. And in this case, have a nice silver surround. But the hidden feature, the hidden gem, I think, is going to be your wireless phone charger. Any other controls you need are probably going to be found within here. This is going to be controls for your infotainment screen. If you don't want to use those touch controls, you can do so here on the dial. Also, quick shortcuts to things like your phone, your home, navigation, music, those sorts of things, back button right there. And then your volume, the one I think is probably most frequently used, is going to be a scroll wheel up or down here. Then tucked just behind that is going to be your center armrest, and under the armrest, just a little bit more storage. Not a whole lot, but you do get a little bit more power available in the USB-C port and a 12-volt outlet right there. And then the overall space is a little bit deep, but not square and maybe not the most productive, but you should be able to find room for whatever it is you need. If you're getting the V, however, you're probably more focused on the driver view, and this is what you'll be looking at. Well, at least the lower portion of what you'll be looking at. And a lot of that information is going to happen here on the touchscreen. But if you can see, hopefully just off to the left, you can go ahead and change what this looks like in a pretty significant number of ways and have what sort of information is going to be popped up and here in your display. I'll cycle through these just very quickly. You also have different versions of the gauge. So this is your tour mode, this is your sport mode, but however you want this to look, you can probably find something that works for you. Just below that, you might notice these little red dots. Those are not going to be visible to your eye. Those are going to be the cameras watching you if you're using your Super Cruise, and that does come standard here on the LYRIQ V. Now the steering wheel itself does wear that V badge, and I actually really like that. It's a small touch, I think, but it adds that dash of color and reminds you you're in a different model because it doesn't scream it throughout the interior. Though I do wish that all of these buttons, this does seem to be the largest accumulation of buttons here in the entire vehicle, surrounded by something other than a shiny black plastic. But the one button you'll be looking forward to using is going to be the V mode. If you press your V mode, the vehicle is going to switch. It'll happen right up there in the display. Toggle it on and off. You can see it just there in the center. And then once we open the V mode, we can go ahead and change a multitude of settings. But V mode isn't the only mode you want to access. You also have competitive mode, and you have your Velocity Max. Velocity Max is going to be activated by either clicking on the competitive mode, double clicking on your V mode, pressing and holding your V mode. If you press and hold it again, it'll go ahead and turn itself off. Or you can go ahead and engage launch control, in which case it'll do so automatically. That's the performance, but there's also the experience. We have one giant sheet of glass just above us. There is going to be a sliding cover for it, so that doesn't mean you have to cook here to enjoy the different views. You also have the controls there located just in the center console, plus your OnStar, SOS, and your emergency flashers listed up above, not down below. And then the only other controls I can really think of, although we do have that camera view rear mirror, is going to be the controls for the seats, which you'll find here in the driver's door and the passenger door. And controls there for the heated back and cushion, and your ventilation, plus your 2-position memory seating, and all the seat controls happening right here. Now, if you haven't yet driven a LYRIQ, I think you should probably go do it. But if you have driven a LYRIQ and you thought, hey, I want this to be more interesting, then this is the one you're looking for. Because 2 clicks of that V mode gives us a ton of power, and if I turn on the competition mode, that means I get even rowdier. Maybe not more power. Velocity Max is the way to do that. That's your 615 horsepower, but competition mode is going to be all about software. But don't worry, I'll drive that a little bit harder. This is not the place for it. Actually, this is the place to go for a cruise, and it does that really well. If you put all these settings in touring mode, this is a nice, smooth, easy drive. And there are a number of assists that come with it to make it a whole lot easier. Right now, I know I can't put it on camera, but I have in my line of sight, basically directly out in front of me, lit up, illuminated, animated turn signals in the windshield that are telling me exactly where I need to turn to. And because this has such a large infotainment screen, following that is not difficult to do in the first place, but this is not a bad place to go ahead and spend hour after hour after hour, especially considering you should be able to get the seats just where you want to, and it rides very nicely. It's also going to be pretty quiet, although if you do ramp up into V mode and competitive mode and Velocity Max, you'll start to get a bit of a soundtrack added in here that not everyone is going to love. And when you're driving it really hard, maybe it's exciting, but around town, I actually prefer the quietness of an EV. That's honestly one of its big selling points to me. And you can also dial in your drive even further because every General Motors vehicle has one pedal driving on or off, and they also have an additional lever. The question is whether or not it's going to be a one-click lever or if it's a progressive lever. In this case, it's going to be what looks like a paddle shifter here on the left side. And the tighter you squeeze that, the more regenerative capacity you have. Although, for folks who haven't done a lot of that, my recommendation is before you start to slow down, knowing you need more regen and trying to get more of it, pull the paddle all the way down first before you start to lift off, and that feels to me like the quickest and I guess easiest way to make for a smooth experience. This isn't going to be the only V model on the road soon. It's going to be followed up by the Optic V, but that's not going to be, I think, quite as refined, certainly not as versatile. It might be more fun around the twisty bits, but is it going to be more comfortable on a long drive? Probably not, because not only does this have more power, but again, it's going to have that adaptive suspension. But it is also going to be quicker than that model, at least so far how it's announced. The Optic V is going to come in at 0-60 time of 3.5 seconds as it's rated, but this is going to come in at 3.3. At least that's what it says it is. But when we got a chance to do a 0-60 launch a little bit earlier in an open parking lot, the car told us 0-60 in 3.1 seconds. Now, while the driving I've been doing today has been pretty tame and mostly around town, this would be what I call the grand touring kind of driving. If you turn it into sport mode, things do tighten up, but not in a way that's ever going to feel punishing. But it's not just a tighter suspension or a tighter steering feel or more throttle response. There is that software that I mentioned, and that's the competition mode. Most of your time will probably be spent in driving like this, but it's not the only way to do it. Is the first thing you're going to do with your LYRIQ V take it to an autocross course? Probably not, but you could. The first thing you want to do though is put it in competitive mode, which yes means you have to go through some of the screens to get there, but comp mode is going to do a couple of things that are going to be really important to you if you're trying to make the most of this. The first is unlock all the power. That's 615 horsepower, 650 pound-feet of torque. It's also going to go ahead and tell those dampers that we are ready to roll and being here to give you a good time. The other thing it's going to do is some software magic, because this vehicle has lots of power, lots of weight, and it needs to manage all of it. And that mostly means, in this case, handling understeer, because so much of that power does come from the front motor. It's actually gonna dial things back when you find yourself in the corners and in and out of the corners, mostly on your way in, so that you don't end up plowing that front end all the way through. This isn't what you're gonna do on the way to and from the school runs or work, but I'll tell you what, your kids would certainly have a good time. And there aren't a whole lot of vehicles you can do that and go have fun on the weekend with. If I were to tally these things up, it comes down to the everyday usability, distinct design, and of course performance. That's what Cadillac says they're looking for in any vehicle that has that V branding, and I think we found everything here. The only thing is it's electric, so can it count? And for me, it absolutely does. Actually, I think it counts in a very unique way because it just seems like it does all of these things very well. And yes, you're gonna have a less efficient version of this powertrain than you find in some of those other LYRIQs, but it feels like it's not the same kind of loss as if you put a very big forced induction engine here versus a standard run-of-the-mill or even something like a hybrid alternative. It might not be for you, and it's gonna be a little bit more subtle than some folks may be looking for, but this is the new wave of performance. This is the quickest Cadillac they have ever built. At least for now, I expect we're gonna see a few more V models out there. But you will have to pay for it, although that's not gonna hurt your pocketbook as much as you might have thought. At just under $80,000 starting, that is gonna be without that destination fee, you can get all of this. And it comes very well equipped as standard. If you wanna add a few more features, by all means, go for it. But I have a hard time thinking of anything 10 or 15 years ago that you could buy for $80,000 who could do this kind of performance, much less have the everyday practicality that comes along with it. And whether or not you are all in on EVs or think they're the devil, they are the new wave of performance. It might not be your style of performance, but there's no denying it's absolutely here. And the LYRIQ V is here to stay. And I expect to see more from Cadillac in the coming years. Let me know down in the comments if you would trade your everyday performance driver for something like this. Is it going to be more everyday friendly or actually more performance than you currently have? Or is it worth jumping up from the standard LYRIQ up to something like this, where not only do you get more performance, but you also get a very different driving style. Not only do we have the adaptable dampers, we also have the software to help make things a little bit more fun when you have your time behind the wheel. For me, yes, it's going to be an upgrade in price, but I think it's quite an upgrade in performance. And as much as I don't need that sort of horsepower, it is quite a lot of fun behind the wheel. Those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, we'll see you down the road.